Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Mondays with Micah. I am in a new location here today. I am in Windsor at the fire department, and I have Marty Lee. He's giving me his business card. Police Chapman, that's not the right word, Chaplain, the police chaplain, and he's going to explain this a little bit further, but you basically created this position, right?
Yes.
Because there wasn't one.
Right.
Once again, folks, people right here in this community seeing a need and filling a need and creating space. And so we're going to have a conversation. As I've been telling you, we're going to be meeting with different types of first responders. Tommy Potter, I will give a shout out, did recommend me meeting with Marty. So I'm so thankful when people say, hey, we love what you're doing and we know somebody else you need to talk to. And the next thing you know, I'm sitting right here in a conference room in the Windsor Fire Department. This is what makes life fun, y'all, when you just kind of keep your heart open, your hands open, and ask the Lord what's next. And then you get this idea of, hey, being a watchman, it is actually a word that a pastor spoke over me, Marty, a few years back. I was in Raleigh at the time at another church, and the next thing you know, he said, you're a watchman. And I was like, I don't know if that was a word I was really hoping for. When you're praying about other things in your life, and then they speak something else over your life, and I'm like, another job for me to do. Thank you. I have sat with that for some time. There's a lot of scripture about that. If you haven't watched the episode, it's the first week in May that I talked about what being a watchman was from a spiritual perspective. But Marty, that is going to be my first question to you, and you can elaborate and go back. But what does being a watchman mean to you in your current vocation that you're doing, but even before that?
I think if we step back, I will call it the beginning because I was in the military. I was a hospital corpsman during the Vietnam era and treating patients who with issues, as you can imagine, were pretty severe. Going from that into law enforcement, I started in law enforcement in 1974.
Okay.
And when I left law enforcement in 1981, I was a state trooper in North Carolina. So dealing with traffic, tragedy on the highways, tragedy in people's lives, but at the same time serving in my local church. I had served as a deacon in pretty much several churches I was associated with over the years. In 1981, I was challenged listening to a sermon by Chuck Swindoll.
Okay.
And it actually was out of the book of Nehemiah, of Hand Me Another Brick, and it dealt with promotion. And it dealt with people who would pass up promotion, and the non-Christian ends up running the organization.
You're right.
So under conviction, I said, okay, God, next promotion, I'll take it. And I did.
Wow.
So we ended up in Arkansas for a couple of years. But fast forward to when we came here. In 2013, we moved here from the Atlanta, Georgia area and immediately got involved in a local church here and was serving as an elder. And I went to lunch with a friend who actually was one of the board of supervisors here in Isle of Wight, Rex Alpha. And he asked me one day, cutting up at lunch, what do you want to do when you grow up? He expected a comical answer. I said, well, Rex, truthfully, I want to give back. He said, what do you mean by giving back? I said, I'm former law enforcement. I've worked with law enforcement in the private sector for many years, insurance fraud investigations, and I know what law enforcement folks go through.
Wow.
But they don't have someone advocating for them. I'd like to serve as chaplain. So he says, I can fix that. Let me talk to the sheriff.
Wow.
So he talked to the current sheriff, Mark Marshall, back then. We met in a conference room similar to this, and I shared my story from becoming a Christian at 16, corporate world, law enforcement world. And I said, I want to help these guys in their life because they need someone to encourage them because they're the ones on the street dealing with the awfulness of society.
You're right.
And the sheriff, smiling, looked at Rex and said, Rex, we need this. He said, but we don't have it in our budget. I said, excuse me. I didn't ask you to pay for it. I said, I'll fund it. This was April 2014. From then to now, I have served Isle of Wight Sheriff's Department as their chaplain. And both with Sheriff Marshall and with Sheriff Clark, when he took over, he's been nothing but supportive of what I do, and which has been great for me. They provide my shirts, my uniform clothes. I provide everything else, and they support me anytime it's needed. They sent me to school, like several years ago, to the International Conference of Police Chaplains, where I got my credentials, and I keep them renewed every year.
Awesome.
and serving Christ since 16, learning as I go,
Yes.
and now sharing that with others. But dealing with life circumstances, whether it be the stresses of life for law enforcement families, and then on-scene disasters, on-scene issues, dealing with death on the street. I've been called out numerous times for death cases, dealing with the family members. It has progressed to the point now I've been called out by Riverside Hospital several times, helping them with people walking through death. And then actually assisting with some of the funerals after the fact.
Like speaking at them?
Yes.
Okay. And so as you're hearing this here today, I feel like I want you to move a little further back.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
This started out of a relational conversation at lunch that was taken to heart, was presented to someone else, that got into another conversation, and now this is 12 years later.
Yes,
12 years later, folks. And, my husband passed on June 12th. So 12 has a significant number to me. We consider that the year of the overcomer. There's things about 12, what that represents biblically. So, but obviously he's just in year 12. He's continuing on in this. But it takes good people. And like you said, there's many of us who may not feel qualified in something like that because you hadn't done it before. You didn't go to theology school per se.
Right.
And then you allow someone else to take these positions ahead of you. And God is asking for us to step up. And so I'm not surprised that Nehemiah was a book that, these were some of these watchmen in the Old Testament stepping up and saying, hey, I have to go and do this.
Well, the issue is we have people, we look at qualifications. If you know the Lord and you're willing to serve, you have the primary qualifications there. The issue is to stay in the Word, stay focused, and seeing a need and being willing to step forward and take the need and run with it.
That's right.
Which is key.
And to continue following that inner guide. So now that you've been doing this 12 years, I just know for me personally, and I would like you to elaborate on this, like there's something about when there's a fulfillment of something. So here you may have done all these things, gotten raises, promotions. What has this experience been for you in this, let's say, part of your story, but also the human experience of it? You're on a different side now.
The issue becomes, this is a volunteer position. I've done this for 12 years because this is what God led me to. The Sheriff's Department and Captain Potter and Sheriff Clark, they've been very supportive in this. I chat with them and say, hey, we need to do this, and they say, run with it. The issue is they need someone just willing to be boots on the ground.
Yeah.
We need people who will say, there's a need, let me step in.
Yeah.
The issue with even people, I'll relate back to the first suicide. I was working with one of the deputies. We got a call for a suicide. We showed up on scene. We were the first two people there. The deputy looks at me, says, you've got the door till help gets here. So I stand at the door to protect the scene. Being former law enforcement, I knew what that was. But as soon as backup came through the door, I went to the family. And so I'm the comfort for the family. And I'll say the go-between. I'm there to help them while the deputies process the scene to do what they need to do for documentation purposes to support the family as well.
Right.
And I stay until the family selects a funeral home. They take the loved one away, and I leave them a business card, and I'm available to come back if they need anything. You have to walk through the full process because that grief that's going to come for them days on end afterwards, they need that experience of someone there who can say, wait a minute, who was here? I've had cases where I've been called, hey, you were with my wife when we had to pull the plug.
Wow.
Will you do the funeral for us? Because some folks don't have the local personal church that they can reach out to.
That's right.
But we as Christians are the person who needs to be there to walk them through it.
Now, when you go into these places, when you get the call, are you praying in the car on the way there? I mean, it has to feel kind of heavy.
I appreciate you saying that because Years ago, I went to my pastor and I called him by name and I said, "You're carrying the burden of this church with as many people as we have. What do you do when the burden gets too heavy?" He just smiled. He said, "Marty," said, "I have 3 men that I go to on a regular basis who pray for me, encourage me. I have the same. A Christian friend that I worked with for many years called it a circle of five.
Awesome.
I have 5 men. Any of those 5 I can go to and ask the question, here's what I'm struggling with, and they support me. I have folks who pray for me on a regular basis." But you're correct. When I get a phone call 7 o'clock in the morning, it's the hospital. "We have a major case here. We need you." Well, within 30 minutes, I'm at the hospital, usually showered, shaved, fully dressed, there. But all the process in my own thought process as I go, okay, this is the situation I'm walking into. What do I need to know? What does God need to give me so that as I communicate, and I do pray, God, give me the right words to say, because the words are not the same for every case.
You're right. And I'm finding specifically this year, and I've told multiple people, in our spiritual walk, if we want to call sanctification, there's the term we say we're dying daily.
Yes.
There's a laying down daily, and I do feel that these type of vocations demand more of that, because you are giving of yourself. But the more, so this year in particular, I've read through the Bible many times, but I've said this phrase more recently, that I do not want people who are calling in a need to just hear an attaboy from me or my opinion or something encouraging. When I have been in the Word and a call comes that I didn't expect, and something that I read resonates, and I'm able to speak truth, you feel a lift off of their burden in the conversation. And so I feel more, let's say, stewarding that, and that's necessary, because you're really wanting breakthrough for people. It's not just about them. Let's say I don't want people to become codependent on me for help.
Correct.
Because our help comes from the Lord. And but yes, we are that in between, like you said. And for some, especially in the widow community, they can get stuck.
Well, the issue is, you're correct. I became a Christian at 16. I'll be 74 tomorrow. And through that walk, I have learned from personal life experiences through losing my father. He was only 67 when he passed away. My wife losing her father after that, then losing her mother, and then my mother. We've walked through losing relatives, but then you've got the piece of your close friends. My best friend many years ago, who was our choir director in Greenville, South Carolina, Dave, was a guy that we vacationed with, him and his family, every summer. And when Dave passed away, I remember saying to my wife, "I've lost my best friend.
Right.
I don't know what I'll do after this." Well, see, God knows more than we know. Because when I moved here in 2013, I met a gentleman, Fred, who is now my best friend.
Wow.
And I thought, isn't God amazing?
How kind. How kind. So you moved here.
And he never fails us.
And I've heard widows say recently that losing their spouse was losing their best friend.
Yes.
And they didn't have a female best friend. And that's an interesting thing, because really, what else would you want them to say? I mean, the good marriages, that's what they're going to say.
That's correct.
And it's not like I can go and tell widows, like, hey, make sure you have friends too, because it's not if, it's when, folks. I don't think that's the right teaching particularly. It's all very case by case, and then, the relationships that these people have. But I will say, what I've said, and even in the beginning of my first book, grieving together made everything better.
Yes.
When you have the community that wraps around you, and you have your faith, that it's a wraparound love. I mean, that's really what can happen. But what I've seen is that's not always happening.
Yes. Well, the problem is grief is real. Grief is necessary.
Yes.
And you have certain folks who will say, "I don't want to be seen as weak." Well, you're not showing weakness. God showed us grief when he was at Lazarus' tomb.
Totally.
He grieved, but yet he knew he was going to raise him from the dead.
Right.
Yet he still grieved. Grief is necessary to walk through that part. Every part of your life has a process. And when you lose someone that you've been with, whether it's a short period of time as you went through, or a long period of time, my friend and his wife have been married many years. They walked through grief of their own son. They had a son who died in his 40s. So grief is real, but unless you walk through grief, you need the support. You got to have someone who knows the Lord, who can share truth. A lot of folks can give you great advice, great platitudes, but you need truth. You need God to give you that.
So another question that I have is, what, you've already kind of alluded to it, but what is your relationship with grief, and how do you grapple with that? Let me communicate it this way. You've just referenced you've walked with both sets of parents now on both sides. This term of trigger, that how do you walk into these raw circumstances and not be triggered yourself?
I think I have an advantage that a lot of folks don't have. Having been a hospital corpsman during the Vietnam era, I dealt with patients with tragedy. I worked in the emergency room the last 2 years I was in. In law enforcement, I dealt with tragedy and domestic issues on the highways. I've walked through it personally, but yet even still, I look back to when my father died. He was diagnosed with cancer at 57, lived to 67, but the last year and a half, I was in Arkansas, he was in eastern North Carolina. So the distance made it a little harder because he died before, as I was crossing the Mississippi River coming home. He passed away then. So it was another probably 12 hours to get home. But the grief of knowing Dad's already gone. But my joy was knowing he's with the Lord, because my dad was a believer. He wasn't earlier on in life, but he was before he passed away. The hard part is walking through grief with people when you know in your own heart and mind they give you a story of them that doesn't show they ever knew the Lord. That's even harder to walk through that grief when we can give them hope from Scripture when we know where they are. And even when we know where they are and there's not hope, it's a little harder to walk that with them. But the grief that I had with my parents, I think God gave me the grace to walk through that. So there's not as much of a trigger for me as it is someone who's dealt with. You have someone who lost a son, then lose a father. When it's compounded,
exactly, and that's real, y'all. And so what I'm hearing him say is that the familiar. It's not that you ever get fully comfortable with it, but you learn how to walk with it and not let it consume you.
I think the part that would consume me more is the feelings for the actual family.
Right.
When you walk on to a porch of a man who just lost his wife, and I show up and I always introduce myself, give him a card, said I'm here to support you and be with you, to help answer questions for you as they work through this. And the father, thank you for being there. And then 2 teenagers come out the front door. What are you doing here? Why are you here? And say, well, I'm here for you. There's nothing you can do. She's gone. You can leave. And in your heart, you have to let that roll off, because you have to say, they're grieving now. And what I have to do is be the feet of God to show kindness, to not let it bother me that they say that, because it doesn't bother me.
Right.
I know they're hurting much more than I would be. Because I know the Lord. I know where her mom is.
That's maturity, y'all. This is why you need people like this who understand the intent. These people, we're saying things out of turn, really. And many widows I have talked to a year later came back and said, I wasn't in my right mind there. I'm like, yes, I know. And they at least could say it. You know what I'm saying? Not all of them could even say it, but I was like, thank you. And I'm like, okay, there is something to that rule of thumb about don't make any major decisions in the first year. In one particular case, I had a widow that I knew that her husband, before he passed, said, I want you to move to South Carolina. I do not want you to stay in this house. She had an old Victorian house. They had a pellet stove. There was going to be a lot of physical things she had to do, not to go through a 3,500 square foot Victorian house alone in the winter, even if she had her dogs. And we put the house on the market. The closer we got to the closing, the more I could tell she wasn't really wanting to let go. And I was basically like, we're moving forward, man. And it was later that she said, I wasn't thinking right there. And I said, no, you weren't. But she had to do it in the first year because of those requests, but it was emotionally harder.
Yes.
And this thing of letting go of something else, because once you get in a new space, then, they're not in the room anymore.
And that's their biggest focus. I have a friend who's walking through that now. And the issue in that old Victorian house, they see that loved one.
Mm-hmm.
But yet when they go to a new house, there's nothing of that loved one they left behind there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's extremely difficult. That's still part of grieving.
Yes.
And that can cause the grieving to go on for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure God expects us to grieve forever.
I don't think so
I think
either.
God expects us to put on a face, knowing that loved one's with Him,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, I will see Him one day, but of taking the stand that, okay, He met my needs here and He set this up so
Mm-hmm.
now I can move on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But moving on is an individual's timeline, not ours. We can't dictate when you move on.
The scripture talked about that some, that they, whether it was 30 days, and I know in the Jewish culture that there is some timelines for that. And I had another widow I talked to, and she said that she kind of adopted that, and she took 30 days to just focus on grieving, didn't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of it, she felt it lift. And I'm like, that is so interesting. But then I've talked to other widows. They said they had no time off. They had to go back to work the next day. They financially could not take the time off. And that didn't hit me right, Marty. I said, duly noted. And so I had to do some research. Is there a bereavement leave in the country? No, there's not. Not a statewide bereavement leave. It's all corporately, individually, and a lot of times they may give you leave. It's unpaid, and it's only 2 days if it is. It's not always enough time, to make some of these initial decisions. So that is something that was a discovery of just thinking, because that wasn't my personal story, to think that there's actually widows that you bury your husband and you go back to work the next day, and you wonder why the grief lasts longer, because there wasn't the time.
You have the younger parents like yourself that not only have to go back on to other things, but you still have children to raise. And that sometimes exacerbates the grief longer. But I think, again, you have to realize everyone's an individual. Yep. Your grief may be different than someone else's, and each person walks through their own. And I use the terminology as God gives them strength.
Yes.
For the person who's a believer, they have a better support level, even if it's just the Lord's support. But if you have your local community church that you're involved with, hopefully you have a group there. My wife has a group of ladies that meet every Tuesday for lunch. So this is ladies supporting one another.
Yes.
You have to build your support group when life is fun.
Yes.
If you live your life and want to be a solo person, well, let me tell you, when death comes, you're going to be a solo griever.
Yes. And isolation is the enemy's camp.
Yes.
And we learned that with COVID, folks. We are not better isolated. It not only affects us physically, it affects our mental health. It affects our emotional state.
Yes.
I mean, what? You said death by suicide. These numbers were up. The amount of anxiety in our country post, the amount of depression. I mean, the cortisol levels, our thyroid's messed up. I mean, the list has gone on and on post-COVID, and even just how our bodies reacted to COVID in itself.
Yes.
We won't get into all of that.
Well, natural death, grief, we deal with most of the time one way, but you brought up a good point. All the suicides that occurred during COVID and even occur to today.
Wow.
Our society's to a point now, it's become so visceral that we see people that are committing suicide because they feel this is the only thing I have left. Well, it's not all we have left. But we as individuals in a community, we've got to start reaching out to each other. If the old saying, see something, say something, well, that's in the criminal element or in the safety element. If you see a neighbor who they're not coming out anymore. We have a neighbor who's probably not going to live much longer, but for years, the years we've lived next door, his blinds were not open by 9:30 in the morning. We were on the phone. We'd call, hey, are you okay? Well, I'm fine. I'm just sleeping in this morning. On occasion, we've called, no answer, and we get one another's code. I open the door and walk in and call him by name. you support one another
That's
by
so good.
being there. I mean, this is where, as a community, I mean, your neighbor, doesn't Scripture tell us
Love
to love
your
your neighbor?
neighbor.
Well, how are you taking care of your neighbor?
I'm telling you, folks, these feel very old ways, the old ways, but what's happening? We're becoming more isolated.
Yes.
I'm going to keep saying that word. We need to knock on the door, and I know that there's a lack of trust now, because
Yes.
let's just say, well, they could have laced that casserole. How can I trust that? We're not friends, actually. There's a stranger neighbor, and you know what's the stranger danger? I mean, our neighbors are now stranger danger. There's so many stories from my generation where they went over and not good things happened to these children. You know, there has become a skewed thing about our humanity, and now there's even more things going on in the internet world, and how people are perverting things in the earth and turning it into businesses and getting caught. And so we're going to be talking to some investigators further, not to expose the ugly side of our humanity, but to speak into the reality of just what these police officers are having to face on a regular basis. It's not just drug busts anymore, y'all. It's not.
Well, you brought up a good point, because what we see, and part of what I do as a chaplain, when we started this program in 2014, I shared with Sheriff Marshall that we initially start just doing ride-alongs, because unless I ride with the officer and he knows who I am, he's not going to talk. I'm not going to understand his needs. They have to learn to trust me. And I think if you talk with most of them at our office, they will tell you, after getting to know me, we build that trust level.
That's good.
But having been a law enforcement officer, you know, even in a community group, we have a first responders group that we have each month, where we have a dinner, we have a conversation, we have a devotion. But it was started because we found that even in a local church setting, if you have an officer in your church and he's coming to church in your local community group, he can't expose his stress that he dealt with all week long, because how do you tell folks in your little church group, Friday I had to pull 2 dead children out of a house? You talk about stress when they may say, my stress was the coffee pot didn't work. I mean, stress, everyone has stress. It's what you do with stress that counts. Give your stress to God. I mean, we know trials come. We were told not if they come, it's when they come. We have to be prepared for it.
And that's really where this whole summer series started to bubble up. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have all of these first responders that are having to face the harsher side of this human experience, where people are mauled. You know, there's decapitation, in car accidents, and these first on the scenes. And I had a firefighter tell me recently, he said, I am a little bit different because I don't see in picture. And so what he was explaining to me was that they do some of these debriefs, sometimes 2 weeks later within the fire department, to kind of give space for some of these on the scene cases for the firefighters and volunteers to be able to get some things off their chest, let's call it. But for the one, he said, kind of when I walk off the scene, it's done for me. My brain doesn't keep looping the visuals.
I would disagree with him, because he can say that verbally. What we find, and I occasionally get called out by the sheriff's department, a crisis will occur, something will happen, whether it be a child or an adult, and I'll get a phone call, Chaplain, can you come out? And the answer is always yes, I'll be there shortly. And what I find, if I can get the people involved, I've been in this room, you and I are sitting in a room where we had a child killed. And I immediately had dispatch have all those who responded to the house meet me here. You know, we sat around this table, and instead of me lecturing them or sharing scripture with them, I just sat back and I said, let's go in order. Whoever was on scene first, tell me what you walked into. And I just let them talk it through. If I understand correctly, I've heard the psychiatrist say that if you spend 20 minutes talking about your experience when it occurred, immediately after it occurred, it keeps from writing it on the computer of your brain. Wow. So think about that. You went through a tragedy, deal with it now. Yes, now 2 weeks later, we may get together. I follow up with these people. If I have an officer who goes through something, I'm on the phone with them, not calling, constant. How are you today? If they say great, if they say tough day, then I reach out.
Y'all, do you see just how critical and I mean, it's this stuff gets me excited because it just feels like God stuff. You know, he's in the middle of it. He's got people brave enough to get into the messy parts of this world. And I mean, just when he just gave that scenario, I'm like, Lord, I could just start weeping about it, because you start to feel the handling with care is what
that is the key.
Handling with care. And but you have to understand the matters of the heart. And like you just said, you could have come in here and felt the need to fix them.
But you can't fix it. You're right. And my wife will tell you, I like to fix things. I want to solve things. But you can't solve it, but you can be there. Be there. Sometimes someone's lost a loved one. I can't go. I can't go talk to them because I don't know what to say. Who said you have to say anything?
Right.
Be in the moment. Be with someone who's dealing with tragedy. They don't need your advice right now. They may later. What they need right now is your presence.
Yeah. And I have a coined phrase, and you're going to probably hear this broken record, that our witness is our witness.
Yes.
Our
Absolutely.
witness is our witness. I like simple little things. And those thoughts, those limited beliefs of saying, I don't know what to say, I'll take a casserole, I can drop and go. And how many times in church and other places they say, how are you, as they're passing, like they're not standing long enough. And there may be those who don't want to have the conversation. Correct. That get asked. And then there's others that do want to share. And then you're not standing there long enough, which can exacerbate their internal world about that, because it doesn't feel like you care.
Scripture tells us to walk circumspectly. We have to walk realizing what's around us. And you're correct. I'm guilty. I have walked by, how are you today? And they say, fine. My best friend says, fine. His answer is always, fine. And I know he's not fine. I know what he's doing. You have to remember, when you go by and you say, how are you doing? Stop long enough for them to either say, well, this week's been, if they start out with a conversation, then stay. If they say fine, then they don't want to talk right now, but that should not be the last time you ask.
And something that different counselors talk about, the inner work, the work, but also the inner child.
Yes.
And I can say that there are times when things happen that I have said this out loud. I wish I had a grandpa or somebody. You just want to curl up into a lap of somebody and just be hugged, like just taken care of. I mean, that, and I have to believe, especially for men, and I think in this community, not saying this community, in the South, let's just say that to be soft, to be a tender man, I think is a very attractive thing personally. But in this culture and in these types of vocations, you have to kind of learn how to disassociate. But somewhere there has to be rooms where you can connect back. Because like he's saying, when we compartmentalize this stuff, it will blow up.
Yes.
At some point. But if you can get it in the early stages and allow this flushing through, and I said, until you feel it, you can't heal it.
Correct.
Until you can actually acknowledge what I saw today was hard.
Yes. There was a book written many years ago. I read it when I was living in South Carolina by Stu Weber, called The Tender Warrior. And the thing is, God calls men to be men. And there's a whole series I've been through with a friend on what God expects a man's heart to be. But the tender warrior also, you can have the warrior mentality, but you also have to have that tenderness, because you walk into a situation, they're not looking for the macho man to come in. I'm a chaplain. I come in most of the time dressed like this. They're not looking for the officer to come in and mandate. They're looking for the guy that's going to step in and say, how can I help? What can I do? And if they say nothing, then stand there, close your mouth, and be available. I make it a practice when I go on a death scene with a family. I meet them, greet them, and if I read the situation, I'll grab the family together and we'll pray first, and then I just sit and observe, walk and observe, answer questions. They'll ask what happens next. I'll share what I know. If they ask an answer and I don't know, I'll say, excuse me, and I'll ask the officer in charge, what can I tell them? Bring information. But in the very end, before we leave, the guys that are on the scene most of the time will join me and we'll pray with the family.
Mm.
I had an officer call me recently, and I was at the hospital. I had just left the hospital, and I had sent him a message. I knew what call he was on. I said, praying for you is all I said. I mean, I'll do that occasionally. And my phone rang, and it was him. He says, Chap, I hear you're out. And I said, yes. He said, I was just asked by the family. The family said, God will never give you more than you can handle. He said, I don't know how to answer that. I said, I'm on my way. Well, I went to the house. We all went in together, along with the funeral director who was still there. They had removed the body. We all sat in the living room, and I shared the answer to that. And we talked. We talked through it, and they all, to a person, gave me a great big hug before we left and said, this is what we needed.
And do you want to share with those listeners what that answer is?
Well, God does give us things sometimes that we can't handle, but there's nothing He can't handle. The problem is it's not through my strength, it's through His strength. We have to be willing to say, God, I can't do this. I've seen people that I've had to deal with that, God, I can't love them. You told me to love them, but I can't love them. But if you will love them through me, it's God's strength that we have to rely on. We are not able to do any of this in our own power.
Y'all, I mean, this is the preacher just rising up, of these teachings, but it's teachings that lift the burdens, because this thinking can create strongholds inside of us, and anger. And anger turns into bitterness. And some anger turns into rage and revenge. I mean, there's all sorts of levels to this. And so many times, I want to talk. I want to bring another term into this. There are those in loss that it is sudden death. There are accidents. There are things that are out of our control. But I know you've had to face, especially walking into these scenes where there is this immediate regrets, them kind of taking it on, feeling guilty about they didn't text. They knew, your brain starts to retrace, like, how could I have prevented this from happening? And taking on a role or a sentence, let's call it, that the Lord, I don't believe, is asking us to carry.
Correct.
Have you walked into some of those rooms like that?
Yeah, well, there's two sides of the story. There was a death out in the country north of the county one time, and I remember walking in the door and feeling like, well, I don't even need to be here. This was a family whose husband had died, who was a strong believer. The wife was sitting on the floor holding his hand, rubbing his hand, and they were talking about, well, they were just at church last night, and this is things they talked about. They knew where he was. And matter of fact, when their pastor walked in, I excused myself and left. They had everything they needed. And then on the opposite side, different location, a family in such grief they couldn't maintain composure.
Right.
And as you say, one would say, if I'd only been here, I was just here 2 hours ago, if I had stayed, would not matter.
Right.
When someone dies of a massive heart attack, of a sudden cardiac arrest, and you can be standing there.
Yeah.
You can have all the technique proper, trained. You can be a paramedic out of this station, right on the scene, watching that person have that heart attack. If God takes them out of here, you don't bring them back.
Right.
It is not your doing.
Right.
Now, granted, there are regrets where you look back at your life in the prior years and say, if only. Yes, you're going to walk through those. But stop second guessing yourself. Start living today.
Yeah.
I mean, God only promises us now. He didn't promise us tomorrow. So start living today as you know you should live, so that when that day comes, you didn't expect your husband to die.
No.
But when he did, you didn't have to look back at the regrets, because you were already walking with the Lord. You knew where you needed to be. And
the beauty, and he's exactly right, because these revelations started collecting. I'm like, oh my gosh, we did our will 7 months ago because we took a trip out of the country, because it was the first time we'd ever gone out of the country with children. We did that for a different reason. Look how the protection of the Lord.
Exactly.
All these things. And how many times have you heard this, y'all, where we were just at a family reunion and 2 days later, blood clot, like there was gatherings where there were people that got to say goodbye. Then there were other times where they didn't get to say goodbye, and that's hard for people to accept.
Well, you've got to remember, You live your life each day to the fullest that God has given you, because you have family issues. You may not have a great relationship with this one. You may have a great relationship with this one. But the relationship, whether it's your responsibility or not, keep the pipeline open. Don't say, well, if he wants to be that way, I'll just have nothing to do with him. You have to remember, God made you the adult for a reason. I call it be an adult. Adult. I mean, you live in a 55 and older community. A lot of times you wonder, is this the toddler community? Because as we get older, and I say we, because I pray don't let me get that way. I want to be kind to my neighbors, but you get to the point that you think, if that person calls one more time. But you can't, you have to, and I personally have to face that myself. Because sometimes in what I'm doing, you get to a point I'm saturated. And remember, you must take time. I'm leaving next week for a week because you got to have time to rebuild so you're useful.
Yes.
Always.
Self-care, folks, back here in this, when you're in these types of work where there's more of an emotional component, you're not just, punching the numbers, if you want to say. There's hearts that are being affected here, and their future days. I mean, looking into the success of that. But so many people, I can't remember who said it, but I was listening to the radio, and it was such a good thought. It was like, we can't, as people walking through grief, focus on the loss. We've got to reset our mind to focus on who's left.
One of my deputies shared with me recently, and I appreciate him telling me this. He said, Marty, I thought of you. Listen, release the need to know. And I'm a fixer, and a lot of times I want to make it right. I look around our department of people who are struggling, and I'll say, how can I fix that? And then God will say, that is not your job. You're to be there to help.
Yeah.
And then the other one, different deputy shared this one with me. He said, the teacher's always quiet during the test. How many times do you say, where was God in this?
Whoa. That's deep.
This is wisdom that I get from my deputies.
That's deep. The teacher's always quiet in the test. Wow.
These are not original from Marty. These are things, as you walk through life with people, if you just take that computer bank, I wrote it down in my phone. I looked at him and said, I've got to remember this.
Absolutely.
Because invariably, I'm going to end up somewhere. Twice I have been to locations to encourage an officer, and I end up being the one encouraged.
Absolutely.
So you're not only the solution. Sometimes you need it yourself.
Yes.
Speak truth to others, because the truth will come back to you.
I mean, look, and it says the word can't go void. I mean, it's and that is so key, man. We obviously, I know you probably heard this, like, we need more people like Marty who has that type of heart. And I have to trust that even whatever the news is saying of our climate of our country and what the millennials do or don't have and blah, 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 this is proof. And it's not just because he's in his 70s and he's from that generation. I won't believe that, because I'm not in his generation. And it was tragedy that awakened some things within myself, but it was also the power of God.
Yes.
And running to the Father, as I love to say, and that's a song, the good Father, that song, and the goodness of God, your goodness is running after me. These are all lyrics that I sing, that our churches are singing. We're not just singing words here, folks. We're reciting truth wrapped in a lyric, because sometimes it's easier for us to remember those. And that's scripture. Goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. For who? And David said, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That dwelling is not just a church building, folks. The indwelling is the chamber of our hearts.
Yes.
And our job is to steward those hearts and hopefully be able to feel the strength of the Lord to walk into rooms that we don't always feel qualified to walk in, and know that you get to be a healing hand, a healing heart, that the tenderization, I've used that term in another blog this recently, that tenderizing that happens when you're walking through grief can kind of break you down a little bit. But in the food department, there's more flavor when you tenderize things, it's more tender. Who wants to eat tough beef, tough chicken, tough anything? Life has a way of creating a tough exterior in us. And we have to fight like hell sometimes to not allow our circumstances to define us, but to refine us. And as I have exercised in certain things, they use these terms about resistance training. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes when you do these high reps, that there's a burning sensation that can happen, but that's waking up these muscles. And so sometimes this burning that you can feel inside you that masks itself as anger is purifying a piece of yourself to level up, folks. You can level up after loss and use it as fuel.
I'm sorry, the anger part, you're right, because you deal with anger, especially officers who work the street. They see the same issues over and over and over, and then they say, well, this next one's going to be the same way. You can't let that anger drive you to the point that the next scene you go to, you're still thinking of the previous one. Our guys have a great ability, and I've really appreciated this, to segment. They just leave a call that's horrible and go to a tragedy, yet they have the compassion to walk onto that scene and treat the people with care. We're blessed in this county with a group of folks who can go to different situations and walk in and out of it and leave, and people know, well, that was different.
Wow.
That someone cares. We have to show that, because sometimes, again, some of these officers are the only face that people see of a sheriff's department, and they're saying, we're blessed. And I can tell you, in Alawite County, we are blessed, very much so.
I've heard it over and over again. Folks, please thank your officers, pay for their lunch, do the kind acts, folks, because you don't know what that day was for them.
And our first responders across the board. I'm in and out of the firehouses, the rescue squad buildings, and our peer support team that work with one another. When a tragedy occurs, if it's an officer's family, they come out of the woodworks to support us. If it's a firefighter's family. And this is what the community should be, but it shouldn't just be the first responder community.
Right.
All our community, when we start rallying around one another, a lot of this bitterness goes away. You can't be bitter if you're busy fixing the problem. And you don't have time.
Love lifts.
Yes.
Love leads us. And I want to believe that we as humans have a great ability to love.
Absolutely.
Let's say that. And once you start seeing what you can do, simple acts of kindness, simple. I'm talking about having that little blueberry muffin when you know a week has passed. And yes, can we heal through food? Not completely.
But it helps.
It does help. It does help. But you know what else helps? When someone knocks on your door and says, I want to wash your car today. You know what else helps? When someone comes over and says, I want to pressure wash your house today. I noticed that your deck needs staining today. When you start to come in, and this is my push because I'm getting a little more aggressive about speaking up. When the thought hits your mind about someone else, it's God.
Yes.
Prompting you, and your timing matters. Just like he sent that text. He didn't know that little text was going to get a phone call back. And that man needed it. And those moments, I'm telling you, will reward you in a way that you're like, oh my gosh, like you feel as broken as you were. You woke up, it was a basic day, nothing big, whatever. You send that text, it felt casual. And then it wasn't casual to the person on the other side.
The officers will tell you they approach every day as if it's a normal day. But what is a normal day for them? I can share with you in my neighborhood, where I live in Smithfield, the folks love first responders. We'll have a dinner, and when we started this, when we moved to this neighborhood 4 years ago, we had a lady say, my brother is a firefighter in New York. What can I do to help? Oh, let me prepare a dessert when you do this. We had another neighbor who said, let me help, and she sent a check. Twice she's done that. I have a friend that lives in Chesapeake who said, let me help. He sends a check. There are people willing to help. Mm-hmm. The issue is you have to let them know the need is out there. Yep. The problem is too many of us know the need's out there, but are not willing to step up. That's the key.
A little bit of a mic drop there, folks. If any of this that you heard Marty say, if you feel something rumbling up inside of you, like, man, I've kind of wrestled with this and I kind of want to do it, but I don't want to fully take anything on. I've got too much. Get in touch with us, folks. This is how we expand the care in this community. And no, these are all about from the heart.
Yes.
He had to start in a way and said, it's not about the money. And how all that has transpired since he's still here. So the Lord will work that out.
He's never failed. I can tell you since 2012 and 2014, walking in these doors and doing this, we haven't done without. Each day I get amazed. I'll go into the office and Captain Potter will share with me, we're thinking of doing this, we're thinking of doing this. They step up to help. I don't have to ask for it. They look and we see a need and they say, how can we help? Most of the time they know before I say a word.
And how does that happen? Because Marty's been trustworthy with the faithfulness of this whole thing. Yes. He didn't have an idea and kind of get into it and say, this is too much. Like, I need to back out. I can't handle it. His conditioning, if you want to call it, his previous work life has been preparing him for such a time as this. Marty, I don't know if you have any final words here you want to share. This has been so fun. It just gets my heart happy to know that there's people out there looking out for other people, interceding for situations, that it's not always the pastor first on the scene. And I'm thankful to hear that there's moments that you can assess this has been handled and they're going to be okay with the team that they have. And so if you are one of those people realizing, man, I don't know if I have quite the level of support that he's talking about. We meet every fourth Saturday of the month at the Hunterdale Fire Department. Do you see some correlation here? Do you see how there is the fire department has space and they're willing to open it up to the community for health and wellness? And what does it do? It allows an opportunity for us to get around the table, to check on people's hearts, to find out if they do have any needs outside of that conversation, right, that we can take action with. And stay tuned on our Facebook page. There's more things that we're doing. You should have already seen by this point where Judy and Drew collected together and they served a local widow. They're calling it the Widow Reset. You should have already seen some of that. We will be doing that again as the needs arise. If you have a desire to volunteer, email us at thewidowwalk or at gmail.com, thewidowwalk@gmail.com. If you are a widow or widower in a community and you haven't been interviewed yet in these 55 and older communities, and you would like to have a sit-down conversation, I will come to you as I have done here today and hear about your story. It matters. Everyone's story matters, and we're here to educate you, hopefully encourage you, and share this. Send it on to your friends in other states who may have lost a loved one recently. Maybe you know a few other chaplains, and it would encourage them to know that they're not the only one who's doing things like this in another locality. Let's continue this conversation. See you next time. Bye-bye.